Bib overall stroke a dungaree. To make a dungaree or a bib overall, we start with the drafting of the pant stroke trouser pattern. After, we use the trouser pattern to develop or to draft bib overall upper bodies. The pant pattern must have more ease for loose feet and less ease for tight feet. But as for me in this tutorial, my pretty bib overall will be of medium size. Okay, hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're watching from. Welcome to Top Stitch Tailoring Studio. In today's video, as per this request, we are going to draft this pretty dungaree, and some people call it a bib overall. Just watch this video up to the end. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let us jump straight to our bib overall practical pattern drafting class. As usual, I draw one vertical straight line on one side of my pattern paper. Also, one horizontal line on top of my pattern paper, which will be my dungaree waistline guide. I label this point A, which will be the starting point for most of my calculated dungaree body measurements. Now, we have one horizontal line, which is the waistline. We need to determine other horizontal lines that are needed for our bib overall project. First is to determine dungaree stroke bib overall pant full length. From starting point A, I measure downwards full length 38 inches. After, I square across a straight hemline. As you can see, my pattern paper is not enough, so you need to add hem allowance of 1.5 inches from the hemline. Okay, now the second horizontal line to be determined is the pant crotch height. From starting point A, I measure downwards hip 38.75 inches. I divide by 4, giving me 9.68. Here is my 9.68 inches. Plus 1 inch for crotch length is. So, all together, I now have crotch height 10.6 inches. After, I square across a straight crotch line like this. The third horizontal line to be determined is pant knee height line. I measure this distance from the crotch to the hemline. I divide it by 2 to get the midpoint. Then, from this midpoint, I mark upwards 2.5 inches for the position of the knee. After, I square across a straight knee height line like this. For accuracy, I need to determine the thigh height line. So, from the crotch line, I measure downwards hip 38.75 inches, divide by 12, giving me 3.2 inches. So, I mark 3.2 inches here. After, I square across a straight thigh line. The last horizontal line to be determined is the pant hip height line. From crotch line, I measure upwards hip 38.75 inches. I divide by 12, giving me 3.2 inches. So, I mark 3.2 inches here. After, I square across a straight hip line. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, all the 6 horizontal working lines that are a must for pant drafting are ready. It should have been 7 lines including hem allowance line, but due to the shortness of my pattern paper, I will just add hem allowance while cutting on fabric. Okay, the next step is to insert calculated body measurements to these horizontal lines accordingly. In this tutorial, I will begin by working on the crotch line. So, from this guideline, I measure inwards hip 38.75 inches plus 2 inch for ease, giving me 40.75 inches. I divide by 4, giving me 10.18 inches. So I mark 10.18 inches here. Then I square these 10.18 inches up to the waistline. Then I connect these 10.18 inch points together to create the front crotch rise. Next is to insert crotch extension to this side. I measure what I have here, which is 10.18 inches. I divide by 4, giving me 2.5 inches. So from here, I mark outwards 2.5 inches crotch extension. Next is to determine the pant middle grain line. I measure this distance from this guideline to this 2.5 inch crotch extension point. I divide by 2 to get the midpoint. After, I square up a straight grain line like this. Next is to work on the crotch curve. The easy way for determining the crotch curve is to measure from the crotch line along this middle line the exact hip 38.75 inches divided by 12, giving me 3.2 inches. So here is 3.2 inches. Then I draw a diagonal straight line like this. Now, at this 3.2 inch point, I measure diagonally upwards exact hip measurements at 8.75 inches, divide by 6, giving me 6.4 inches. So I mark 6.4 inches here. Then, using my curved ruler, I connect these points together to create trouser front crotch curve line. We are done with the crotch area. Next is to work on the dungaree bottom opening. I come to the hemline at this grain line. I measure outwards bottom opening 13.5 inches divided by 4, giving me 3.3 inches. So I mark 3.3 inches here. Also, this side I mark 3.3 inches. After, I connect this crotch extension point to this 3.3 inch point with a straight line. Also, this crotch line point to this 3.3 inch point. The trouser front leg is already showing shape. Depending on the style and the design you are working on, you can leave it at this level or you can shape the knee. In this tutorial, I'm going to shape the knee. Therefore, I come here at this point. I mark inwards 0.5 inches knee shaping. Also, this side I mark inwards 0.5 inches knee shaping. After, I create my new trouser leg seam lines in this way. We are done with the trouser leg. shaping. Next is to work on the trouser waistline. From this crotch rise line, I measure inwards waist 29 inches divided by 4, giving me 7.25 inches. So here is my 7.25 inches plus 1 inch. Since I don't have a hip curve ruler, I come at this hip line point. I mark upwards 2 inches. I now connect this point to this point like this to create dungaree hip side seam line. Next is to shape the trouser from the center front crotch rise. From this initial waistline, I mark downwards 0.5 inches. I create the new shaped waistline. So, ladies and gentlemen, the front is ready. But before we go ahead to work on the dungaree part, I will first trace out the front for drafting the back. So here is the traced front pattern. I will use this to develop the back pattern. First is to shift the crotch line for the back. So from this initial crotch line of the front, I mark downwards 0.5 inches for the back crotch. I square across a straight short line. After, I insert crotch extension allowance to the back. What I have here at the front crotch extension, which is 2.5 inches, I extend it to the back. So at this point, I mark outwards back crotch extension 2.5 inches. But you can mark 3 inches if your client has big hips. But as for me, 2.5 inches is okay. I come to the knee line. I mark outwards 2 inches. Hemline, I mark outwards 2 inches. I connect these points together to create my trouser back seam line. Next is to work on the trouser back waistline. From this center front crotch rise, I mark 1.5 inches inwards. Then I square up a guide straight line. Still, at this 1.5 inch point, I mark upwards 1.5 inches for the trouser back shaping. Next is to insert waist measurements to the back. At this 1.5 inch point, I measure like this. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry my camera had stopped recording, but here is a preview of what I did. I measured from this 1.5 inch point like this, waist 29 divided by 4, giving me 7.25 inches. So here is my 7.25 inches. I added 1.5 inches. Then I connected this point to this crotch line point. Now the camera is on. Let us continue. Next is to determine back crotch curve and crotch rise. I measure this distance. I divide it by 2 to get the midpoint. I now connect this point to this midpoint in this way. Also at this original front crotch curve, I mark upwards 0.5 inches for the back crotch. Then using my free hand, I create the back crotch curve in this way. This line is not part of my working lines. We are done with the drafting of the dungaree stroke bib overall pant drafting. Next is to work on the dungaree upper bodies. I get my new pattern paper, then I lay extendedly the front pant block like this.